Maximize your yields while spreading out your workload with the earliest maturing winter cereal. Visit kws.com/CA to see how our hybrid rye varieties can work for you. High yields, high quality, high value for your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. No, it is not Tuesday. It is Wednesday, July 3rd, but I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Yes, with the Canada Day holiday on Monday, it has shifted everything over a day, and I just realized I have like this wonderful little sandwich show between the Canada Day celebrations and the 4th of July celebrations for our American friends. It's just a party. And I hope you have all your fingers after this week is done. Firework safety is real. Everybody, it's real. Okay, great show lined up for you today. I'm super excited about the conversations we've got lined up. And so before I get to that, I did pull a clip from Wheat Pete's Word. Now, Sean did yesterday, and hats off to him, did an Agronomic Tuesday, and he pulled together so many great tips that are in our school series that you can find over on YouTube. The other thing we do, and I know you're all very used to hearing Pete on Monday's show, but Pete also hosts his own podcast, Wheat Pete's Word. It's been around for over 400 episodes. Yes, that's right. He does one a week, so you can do the math, how long this has been going on. He every Wednesday, I post it on RealAgriculture.com. It goes to, of course, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere else that you find your podcast. And I pulled a clip from it this week because there's a really important conversation. Several really cool things, but one in particular that has come up, and we're having these discussions within our team and within the agronomists we're talking to about working the Enlist system, the Extend system, and working weed control around these systems in the year after we're growing these crops. There's definitely a lot of questions and some frustration, definitely, about what you can and cannot tank mix and how to deal with volunteers the following year, all of those things. So I pulled a clip on that. You'll also hear from Brian Voth with Intellifarm out of Manitoba. He's going to give us, we're going to focus, I think, on corn and wheat markets right now, but of course, I'm sure we'll talk about a few other fun crops in there as well, so stick around for that. And super excited, Jim McComb, he's a farmer and rancher out in the Marmora area of Ontario. He took the Wetland course. We don't know if he's passed yet, but he's got some really great observations on sort of the issue that some of us have in balancing what conservation districts and modeling wants as far as land use, and where farmers and ranchers at times get kind of peeved on what is considered wetland, and why do we have this friction. So Jim has agreed to join me on the show, talk about his experience, as well as, you know, how we might navigate some of this, because, and I'll explain a little more later, but if you haven't heard, Eastern Ontario, of course, just recently had 3 conservation districts put a pause on some of the wetland mapping, and it has created quite a bit of controversy. So I want to try and navigate some of that as well. At the end of the show, we've got actually some news issues that we need to tackle. So hang around for that at the end. I shall do my best, but everybody be kind. I'm not great at the news, but I keep trying, and practice makes progress, right? Okay. As always, if you've got feedback on today's show, give us a call, 1-855-776-6147, or you can zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. And of course, find us across social media. Let's take a quick break, and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's hybrid fall rye varieties and their end uses, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your fall seed strategy specific to your region.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Join Chatsworth Farm in the county of Vermilion River on Saturday, August 17th for their 5th annual Alberta Open Farm Days. Take in the artisan market, live music, cooking demos, a barbecue, and farm tours. It's a free event you won't want to miss. Learn more by visiting chatsworthfarm.ca. All right, it's time now to take a look at what's happening in the grain markets. And so without further ado, we jump to my conversation with Brian Voth. Joining me now to talk about my favorite topic, the grain markets. Just kidding, it's not. Is Brian Voth from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and also the founder of Intellifarm out of Manitoba. Brian, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Lyndsey?
I'm doing well. For those watching.
I was going to call you out by saying that this is your favorite topic. And
it's not my favorite topic.
It's a lot of days it's not even my favorite topic, but I have to talk about it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, that's accurate. But the markets do matter, okay? These things are pretty darn important, so we will pay attention. Okay, so I wanted to ask, and you corrected me. I said, so why is corn terrible and wheat great? And you said wheat is not great. But let's start there. We have a bit of an interesting dynamic with corn and wheat prices right now. So what's going on?
We do. I mean, in corn, few surprises, obviously, with that acreage report last week from USDA. A lot more corn in the ground than what was expected to be planted this year. That is going to have some pretty negative connotations to the balance sheet. However, I also think that a lot of that's probably already somewhat priced in, along with the fact that you can't ignore the amount of moisture and flooding and what that's going to do for acres. So it wouldn't surprise me if at some point they end up resurveying acres down the road like they've done in past years. Or at the end of the day, the yield is just going to be a lot lower than what is expected or than what's penciled in right now. So balance sheet wise, I mean, if you take 181 bushels on 91.5 million acres, yeah, the balance sheet looks ugly, but that's not really an accurate way to look at it, I don't think. Yeah, aside from that, you look at what the funds have done and holding this massive short position in corn, holding short positions across a lot of commodities, actually. But on the other hand, and we should go back and look at this when Sean and I were talking about this, because it was probably a year and a half ago when I told him that my downside objective on corn was $3.90 a bushel. And, well, we hit it last week.
Okay.
So to me, I think the downside on corn is relatively minimal from here, which does not mean that we're going back up necessarily,
right?
But it just means that we could move into a sideways range. And if you look at a bit of a history lesson here, going back, after that run up from 2010 to 2013, when we came down in 2014, prices essentially went sideways from 2014 to 2020.
Right.
So now we've had a similar pattern again, run up in late 2020 till the highs in 2022. Now we've come back down. And then back then, that 390 to 420 level, that was kind of the highs back in 2014 to 2020. To me, that could very well be the new floor price.
Right.
And now we move into a sideways range until we know better what this balance sheet looks like, where the supply is going to be at, And on the plus side, with prices now being at kind of 4-year lows, it should be also generating more demand. And that's a big part of this puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to chew through it somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so not a great feeling to maybe be near the floor, but maybe it is a floor. And that at least adds a bit of like, okay, this is what to expect and we can make decisions going forward.
Well, and if you're near the floor, it's just less distance to fall.
That's right. And if you're feeding livestock, it's great. Let me tell you. That is a wonderful place to be when corn prices are that low. Spoken as a livestock producer. Okay, so then what's going on with wheat then? Is it, as you say, it sucks less than corn? I would like to say wheat's doing not bad, but I like wheat. So there you go. But where are we at with wheat?
I'm not a wheat fan because when I do budgets, I'm like, why do we grow this?
No.
Aside from, I know that we need to, and you can only grow so many oats. See, like I love oats, but that's just not feasible necessarily either. So, on the wheat side, so same thing actually, similar to corn, Chicago wheat also has gone back and found the old highs from 2014 to 2020. But Kansas and Minneapolis have not. Those actually still have further downside ahead of them potentially. Okay. But it also makes sense because the hard wheat balance sheets are a little tighter than the soft wheat balance sheets. So it does make some sense why the Kansas and the Minneapolis prices have held up a little better than the Chicago prices. Unfortunately, to me, that means that there is still potentially more downside risk ahead of us in the Kansas and the Minneapolis prices. So, and again, to me, when we do budgets, like even at, if we're looking at $5.50, $6 corn prices, which would be previously absolutely exceptional prices, now they look kind of, it still pencils out better than $8, $9 wheat. Right. So that's why I say like it's hard to say that corn sucks and wheat looks really good when I kind of look at it the other way.
Yeah. Okay. In fairness, you're right. It's all about the profit margin, not the initial price. And but I'll throw this back to you. Which one can snorkel better? Because there are some areas, so Ontario is very wet, Manitoba is excessively wet, so we've got some regions in the U.S. that are similar. Still, yes, we've got some dry areas too, but that's my question, at least for our friends here in Ontario, Manitoba, which one has a better snorkel? So there you go.
Well, when I went up flying a couple of weeks ago, I will say the cereal crops look phenomenal for the most part. Like there's obviously water sitting around in some of those spots, definitely. Now at that point, the corn was too small to really tell from the air. But now we're actually finally starting to get some heat here, at least in Manitoba. I suspect in the next week or two, you'll be able to stand in a cornfield and watch it grow around you. So the bottom, again, whether it's a wheat field now or a cornfield, the bottoms of the drains, so that 5-10% of the fields, that stuff's going to be done no matter what. Hopefully the rest of the fields can make up for that and use this moisture at least. So yeah. Obviously we just need that long season and it has been cool and slow for corn.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, guys. Brian, you left Ontario too soon. It's quite lovely this year. Yeah, so it's been very warm and damp. I'll go with that one. It is very challenging to make hay, and there are definitely some drown out spots. But I will tell you, the early corn that went in like decent shape looks phenomenal. It is like 3 feet high, and I'm not kidding. Like it is way past even your knees potentially. Maybe it's your knee high by 1st of July. It is looking pretty sweet, and then other stuff is very sad. It is a sad, sad crop. So yeah, it's the lottery this year on the rain side. Let's switch gears a little. Let's talk about our other cousins, canola and soybeans. Any excitement in the canola market? How are we looking there?
Yeah, we hit support on canola at that $600 level last week, and we held, and we've now had a pretty solid bounce up. Obviously, we're up at 654. Approaching resistance, which comes in around that 662 level on the November. So we'll see whether we can manage to get through that or not. again, there was a little bit of a surprise on the Stats Canada acreage numbers coming in at 22, just over 22 million acres, so about 500,000 higher than what was expected, and even higher than what was projected back in March. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, given how they've changed their surveys on this, that survey, the answers were actually from December, which makes no sense at all. But so the acreage is actually very similar to 2023 using that number. Again, bottoms of drains are going to be done and whatnot. So yield becomes a big factor going forward as well. But the bigger problem that we've seen for the last number of years is just the demand issue in canola. Crush demand is phenomenal, but export demand has just never come back. And this is always the problem to me. Like, while it was a lot of fun selling $25, $27 canola, the damage that did on a demand side is huge. And we talked about it 2 years ago, that it's very easy to get rid of demand. It takes a long time to get it back. And that's where we're in right now. Our export demand is still only like 65% of normal. And it's not China, which is what a lot of people think, but it's not actually China. It's just a few of the other buyers that were very consistent canola buyers in the last number of years or last decade that haven't stepped up in the last year or two. So somehow we need to get that demand back. Now, prices dropping down to $600 a ton or $570, something in that is probably going to do it. Also, we're much more competitive with European values then. So I think we are on track to start adding that demand back. I still don't think we're going to get back to 10 million tons of exports like we had prior to 2021. But again, it takes a long time to build demand back and very little time to get rid of it.
Yeah. So in that, it begs the question on, even if, crush, I assume, is going pretty much at capacity. So if that's the case, then we are dependent. We need that export demand to come online.
Right. And crush capacity has expanded immensely in the last number of years. But we can't add 4 or 5 million tons of crush capacity to make up for the lack of exports. We're adding 2-3 million tons, that kind of thing. Obviously, we've talked about this over the last few years, and some of the crush plants that were announced already got kiboshed a long time ago, and some of the expansions have been happening. Some of them are underway or being built right now, like in Regina. So those all get added into the picture, over the next couple of years. But even still, I think when all of the plants were announced a couple of years ago, it was an extra 6 million tons or so of crush capacity. Well, there was no way at that point that we could have that much crush capacity and our full export program. So he said one or the other was going to have to get cut. And given that all these crush plants were being built by mainline elevators, it was like, well, they're going to feed the crush plants and cut back on the export side because crush plants can only do one thing. So you're not going to not crush canola. But then we had that whole situation of, $25, $27 canola, and the export program kind of took care of itself, I guess, in a way. Yes. So
not in a good way, Brian. Not in a good
way. Like I said, it was fun while it lasted, but we also knew that it was not going to last. And now we're on the flip side of it. And we've kind of said over the last year that 2024 was going to be I don't know, year of reckoning might be a little bit of a harsh way of putting it, but where a lot of farms probably are going to end up selling grain under their cost of production and need to be able to ride that out or plan better or cut back on the cost side, which again, easier said than done.
Much easier said than done. Or you could just, as you mentioned, grow oats and solve all your problems, right?
Oats knows.
Okay. We're kidding somewhat because, caution, how many acres of oats went in? How close is that to tipping? Because oats is feast and famine, right?
Yeah, actually, oat acres were lower than what I thought that we would see this year. And oat acres have had this massive pendulum swing the last few years, obviously. $10 oats does a lot to buy oat acres. On the flip side, there is a limit that even the most granola people won't want to pay $10 to eat oats.
Yeah,
so
just oats.
Yeah. So you've seen this oat balance sheet just bounce back and forth from like record tight carryout to a record high carryout. Yeah. And you've seen acres follow. And so last year we had like the lowest oat acres in decades, which has brought the balance sheet back in line again. So we knew that there was going to be a jump in oat acres this year no matter what, but actually the jump was less than I thought it would be. You know, we came in just basically right at 3 million or 2.9 million. The comments from a lot of farms right now are definitely that there is a potentially big yield out there, despite the fact of losing bottoms of drains and whatnot. Right now, conditions have been phenomenal for the cereal side. Yeah. But all winter long, you know, we could get $4.75, $5 oats. I'm talking Southern Manitoba pricing, and $5 oats. You needed probably more like $10 wheat to make the same amount of money, which we've never been able to sell for this year. So it just, to me, that was a good reason why I thought oat acres would take a big jump. The other thing I guess I would just comment on some of these acres numbers is because of the lateness on seeding, these acre numbers may not have captured everything. Yeah. And so there might actually be more oat acres in the ground. They just may not have been reflected in these reports because of the late seeding side of things.
And this speaks to why it's so important to be thinking ahead, because you could have been potentially capitalizing on some of those numbers. So you're right, Brian.
That's nice to hear.
There you go. Let's end it there on a positive note.
Okay. Well.
All right, yeah. There's, of course, many more that we could cover, but I think we've got lots to sort of wade through. So, Brian, I hope things dry out and stay warm out there in Manitoba. The crops really could use it.
Well, we're here's to hoping. That's what the forecast shows, and
all right.
As long as it's not always like next week. That's
right. Yeah, that keeps us hoping, though, Brian. We just keep watching the 10-day forecast. Yeah,
like a carrot on a stick.
That's right. All right. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks, Lyndsey.
We're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with a clip from Wheat Pete's Word right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and Prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
To Real Ag Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by KWS Seeds. Maximize your yields while spreading out the workload with the earliest maturing winter cereal from KWS Seeds. Visit kws.com/ca to see how our hybrid rye varieties can work for you. High yields, high quality, high value for your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856. All right, as promised, I've got a clip from today's episode, the July 3rd episode of Wheat Pete's Word. A quick note, so we're going to hear about corn nitrate, so sampling nitrate N on rapidly growing corn. We're going to hear about a fungicide strategy for soybeans very quickly. And then the last part, and that's the part I promised, is looking at using Enlist, the Enlist system, and how that may complicate weed control either this year or next year. year. So stick around for that. And just a quick heads up, sometimes trade names are different. So if you've got any questions, let me know, but I'm pretty sure we should be safe on this one. All right, here's Wheat Pete.
I want to move on to the agronomy answers. First up, a caller saying, hey, Peter, so I'm wondering, what about nitrogen on my corn crop now? It's kind of getting to be that knee-high or almost waist-high. I'll go out and I'll pull a nitrate sample. Whoa, stop. Can't do it. Nitrate samples are a great tool, but you have to know how to interpret them. And I've talked to many, many people that have pulled nitrate samples. They get the results back. Gerard actually sending me a text saying, Peter, how much do I believe these nitrate results? Because they're saying to apply 0 nitrogen. They are a guide, and you have to look at how much nitrogen you've applied, how much manure, how much organic amendments over the history, and what is reasonable, and adjust it based on the nitrate sample. But if you are going to nitrate sample waist-high corn, that result means nothing, because as soon as the corn crop hits the rapid growth stage, so anything over knee-high, it's growing so fast, it's pulling all the nitrate out of the soil, and over time, even if you have 300 pounds of nitrogen applied per acre, over time, that nitrate level will go to 0. Greg Stewart did a bunch of this work back when he was with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and the corn crop has such a nitrogen demand. As its rapid growth phase, it pulls those nitrate levels to 0. So trying to interpret them over knee-high corn is just about impossible. Use those nitrate samples you pulled earlier and use them with everything else that you have to make the best nitrogen recommendation that you absolutely can. All right, next, fungicide on soybeans. So a great study that Lauren Benoit, she's with Bayer, the excellent agronomist, and she sends out a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter. She found a North Dakota study, and I've had this argument so many times with Albert Tenuta. It's kind of like, so spray at R2.5 or spray, and some of the time, or spray at R1. And I'm looking at him saying, Albert, when I spray at R1 in my no-till soybeans, most of the fungicide is hitting bare dirt because they just haven't canopied. Really cool study from North Dakota State that Lauren found. And canopy matters. It makes perfect sense. So in that study, and remember that we would normally say if you're a one-spray person for soybean fungicides, you are going to spray at R2.5. And if you're a two-spray person, you're going to spray basically at R1.5 or right at the beginning of R2. R2 is when there's a flower at the upper 2 nodes on 75% of the plants in the field. You're going to spray right before that or right around that time frame, and then come back 10 days to 2 weeks later with your second fungicide application in those really heavy white mold prone fields. But in the North Dakota study, they add in the effect of canopy. And so they got excellent results at late R1. So basically that means there is a flower on 100% of the plants, but it's not necessarily on the top 2 nodes. If they had 100% canopy at that point, they got excellent results from their fungicide application. If they did not have full canopy, they did not get nearly as good results from that fungicide application. If they went to early R2, again, if they had 100% canopy, that's when they got the best results out of that fungicide application. So as you go to time that fungicide application, know that typically it's R2.5, but if you don't have full canopy, you might want to hold that back. If you're Oxford County, conventional tillage, and at R1, those soybean plants are already halfway to your knee, and it's just looks like a lawn out there, yeah, earlier fungicide application probably is a good bet for you. Okay, next. Enlist, a great herbicide, but a note coming out of Ryan Benjamin's just reminded me, if you are spraying Enlist or Enlist Duo, basically the 2,4-D choline, you cannot tank mix any volunteer corn herbicides at all, because there's so much tank antagonism. You have to split Enlist and the Assure or the Select or whatever you're using on your soybean crop for volunteer corn control. You have to split them apart. It just doesn't make sense to try to put them together as well. And there won't be much of this yet, but this is a watch out for next year, because if you are growing Enlist corn is tolerant to the group 1 herbicides that are FOPs. So things like Assure, that's Quizala FOP. And so next year, when you have volunteer corn in your soybeans and you say, I'm going to take that out, I'm going to go spray Assure, if that's Enlist corn, it won't kill it. You have to go to the DIMs, and so that is clethodim, so things like Select or Statute or Cethoxidum. I mean, Post is one of the original ones, and it would take it out as well, but it's not really good on corn. You have to up the rate a bit or keep the rate fairly high to take it out. So just remember, make notes. I grew Enlist corn in that field. Next year, to get rid of the volunteer corn, I have to use a DIM Group 1 herbicide.
All right, so there you have it. Thank you, Pete, for joining me on the show, whether you knew you were going to or not. If you would like to hear the entire episode of Wheat Pete's Word, you can, of course, head on over to wherever you get your podcasts and search for it, find it there, or head to wheatpete.com. You can find this episode as well as all the past episodes there as well. And yes, it's on YouTube too, if that's where you like to listen. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with Jim McComb right after this.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Wednesday, July 3rd. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Almost said Tuesday there, everybody. No, it is Wednesday. It is July 3rd. And if you were following along last week, either online or on the issues panel, we did talk about an issue here in Eastern Ontario, where I am, where 3 conservation districts had a wetland mapping consultation underway. So essentially, the conservation districts had posted a map that showed existing protected wetlands, and it showed on a GIS map where the expanded wetland area may end up. Farmers, ranchers, landowners who saw that map and potentially disagreed with having land designated as wetland could contact the conservation districts and have a meeting and basically go through whether or not this particular piece of land should be wetland. Well, needless to say, it caused a lot of controversy. People felt that it was being pushed through. There wasn't enough time for all the consultation that needed to happen. And so we did see just last week that they paused the consultation process. And we haven't heard yet when that consultation may kick back up again. However, we did hear from the conservation districts that there had been an overwhelming response to the request for consultation, and therefore they were putting it on pause till they could put together a different plan. This, of course, got my head thinking about, okay, so hang on a second. What is it that makes certain areas designated as wetland? Because we know that it's not always necessarily standing water or a pond or a river, etc. We know that there's different classifications. And so that got me thinking, I need to look into this more, which connects me with my guest now, who is actually a farmer and an agronomist who is digging into what it means to designate land as a wetland. Joining me now is Jim McComb. He's an agronomist and a farmer from near Marmora, and not just a grain farmer. You've got cattle too. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Lyndsey. It's great to be on the show.
All right. Now, I mentioned the cattle because we've got something in front of us here that near and dear to both our hearts, I think, certainly is land use and conservation, but also in light of perhaps some of the more challenging issues happening here on the east part of the province with wetland designations. It brings up a lot of questions about what makes a wetland. And you've had some recent experience taking a course that really opened your eyes to maybe just how large some of these challenges are. So, Jim, what is that course? And then we'll talk about sort of your take on it.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of being selected out of 1,000. There's 1,000 on the list wanting to take the course, the Ontario Wetland Evaluation course. It's administered out of Nipissing University in North Bay. So it's up there in the woods, and there's 40 students, and the professor said it was a rarity to have agriculture-based people take the course.
Okay, which is fascinating to me, because if we think about what I would consider, conservation areas, sure, some of us might think, a lake and the woods, etc. But for so many of us, we farm right up against or in the middle of what others may consider conservation areas. And we have streams, we have ponds, we have so many areas on our farms that potentially are ecologically sensitive. What was your did you talk about the fact that agriculture wasn't well represented maybe in this course?
Yeah, I talked to the professors that, and they have such a broad base to cover. Ontario has a huge amount of wetland and a valuable resource in both southern, but a lot in northern Ontario. That's a good carbon sink, a good resource for timber, a good resource for activities like hunting and fishing. Mm-hmm. And so agriculture doesn't get the spotlight here because I think partially because of the course location in North Bay. There's some agricultural land up there, but it's limited, and there's so much to focus on. It's only a 5-day course, so there's so much to focus on to get our heads around in deciding whether a wetland is a marsh or a swamp or a fen versus looking at agricultural land that's really not in that area.
So, and therein, I think, is the crux of part of the reason we're having this conversation is exactly that. So it's a 5-day course. We're hopeful you passed, Jim. We'll find out if you did. It is very intense.
We will.
As you mentioned, yeah, we hope you do. But as an agronomist and as a farmer, why did you want to take this course? How does this fit into what you're doing in your business and with your livelihood? And why is this important to you? Why did you want to do this?
Well, Lyndsey, in the 20 years I've ran the Farmer's Edge agri-coaching, I've had multiple interactions with the conservation authorities and with farmers. And sometimes I go out to the site and I'm just sometimes a help with negotiations or throw some ideas in there on what we can do with wetlands that are bordering farmland. And I decided as things were evolving and some cases are being taken to tribunal or court, that I need to have qualifications to be able to be in that position. And farmers really need the help.
So, yes, so this is one of the things now, personally, so I'm a livestock operator as well. We have land, we have a creek on site, we have, and conservation is important to our farm personally, and I think a lot of farms would say that as well. However, it does become a very contentious topic when conservation comes in, and like we've just seen here on the east side of the province, and wants to designate a whole bunch of land that perhaps you're currently farming as, a wetland. And I think a lot of farmers are looking at it going, this is not necessarily maybe something that's in their wheelhouses to be able to argue effectively because, and this is the one thing I want to talk to you about, is many times, people say, well, there's no water there. So why are we designating this a wetland? So walk me through sort of what makes this designation and why maybe it's so contentious.
So wetland is determined by having the first thing we look at is having 50% wetland type vegetation. So there's a list of trees and ground vegetation and some pretty obvious ones. And then there's some that will grow on both upper land that's dry and wetland. But we look for that 50% cover of the ground with wetland plants. The other thing we look at is we go out there with what I call a Dutch soil auger and pull a sample, and you'll have clay soil, which is kind of a gray blue sticky soil, and it will quite often have iron inclusions, little rust spots in the soil, which is a good indicator of a wetland. But if you pull a sample and it doesn't have those indicators, you start to lean towards maybe it's not a wetland, or maybe it's just seasonal that the water's on there. Then there's aeration in the soil later on in the season. We've got some soils right now in Ontario that are underwater, even with crops growing on them. So
that's right.
They are not wetlands. Yeah.
So, and that I think is part of the issue and especially when, with farmers who know their land well and who perhaps have farmed there for generations, to have someone come in and, say, well, this actually is wetland, when perhaps, as you mentioned, there are other areas that are much wetter during the season than that particular piece of land. And it does create a lot of friction, I think. And let's back up a step. Not everybody loves being told what to do on their own land.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the conservation authorities, the people in the course were engineers and biologists. And we were in groups of 4. I had a great group that, there was one that could, Tracy could identify a bird just by the song. And so you're surrounded by experts. And I think there's a point of, they have a lot of expertise and we should take that into account, but it's good for the farmer to learn what might impact their land. When these borders have been drawn up, quite often they're done with GIS programming, right. and it's very loosely fitted, I'd say, in determining wetland. Sometimes it's just determining it by the presence of water in the spring. So right. I think some of the software can capture more land than what really, when you get boots on the ground, is wetland. So right. So the next steps might be having boots on the ground to determine.
So, and I think you've identified, and this is, and I'm continuing to follow what's happening here in Eastern Ontario with the conservation districts here, that, that was what was presented to everyone, was the GIS map that showed the proposed wetland areas, or what would be redrawn essentially as wetland areas. And many people were incredibly, upset by that, because, it was clear that it hadn't necessarily been ground truthed, if we want to use that word. And so it does create, there is a consultation process, but you have to book that appointment. You have to have someone come out, and to me, in and of itself, that sort of creates conflict. So for, let's say, and you're taking this course as a proactive measure to be sort of a mediator, or potentially be one of those experts that goes to these meetings. How can a farmer best prepare for one of these consultations? What would you suggest that they do should they have these questions and put in for one of these meetings?
Yeah, well, I think firstly is understand that the conservation authority is trying to do their job with the tools they have. They have thousands of acres to evaluate. So go out there with a positive attitude, I think. Don't be fearful. Like the land that is already cultivated is not wetland. They can't pull it into being wetland. It's farmland. So and get informed. There's the Ontario Wetland book is online if you want to do some research. through it. And don't be afraid to reach out to someone that's more comfortable with or has dealt with the Conservation Authority before to discuss with them. But I'd maybe consult with someone before I'd have the Conservation Authority in, just to have a better preparation and details on your own land. And look at the maps, the online maps.
Yeah,
they're very helpful.
Yeah. Now, it does also bring up, the fact that there are many farmers doing significant projects on their own land to protect certain sensitive areas, riparian areas, wetlands, etc. And my mind sort of goes to, we do have funding programs that support some of that work. We have species at risk program, and we have. So to me, that should help to tip the balance of how confrontational conservation in Ontario might be with farmers, etc. Have we not done a good enough job potentially at supporting farmers protecting some of these areas proactively?
Farmers have done a great job protecting wetlands and sensitive areas. And in fact, agriculture has an important role to play. We're supplying some of that water with tile outlets, and those tile outlets, putting them in properly, can influence the water, the quality of the water that we have. Managing the nutrients can influence the quality of the water in the wetland. And just recently, there's a program in Niagara where we're using goats to pasture off an invasive species called Phragmites. And that makes me think, oh, well, maybe agriculture has a larger role to play in wetland conservation and improvement in wetlands. So yeah, farmers keep doing what you're doing. Look for those programs. There's programs right within the conservation authorities to fence off, quite often to fence off livestock, or have a remote watering system for livestock. And keep up the good work, but be conscious that there are limits at what we can do. I've talked to farmers that have pulled damp land into a field, and then they've regretted it because it's not very good soil to work with, and then it's it's work to get that back to being wetland too. So
All right, Jim, thank you so much. Also, I didn't know how to say Phragmites. I've always just said Phragmites. So thank you for fixing that one for me. I learned a new word. So there you go. So I appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today. All right, if you've got feedback on this segment, or of course anything on the show, give us a call, 855-776-6147, or zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com. All right, we're going to take one last break, and I'll be back with the top ag news right after this.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Wednesday, July 3rd. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and as I promised, we are going to touch on a few news stories, but if you're looking at the clock, you'll realize I left myself about 5 minutes, and that's about it. So let's rip through these relatively quickly. First off, and at recording time, which is a little bit earlier, of course, than when you're listening to this show, we still had not heard back on the outcome of yesterday's meeting between Cargill and the union that works at the Dunlop plant at Guelph. So we are into the second month of this strike. This strike at the beef processing facility at Guelph started May 27th. We did find out late last week that both sides, so Cargill and the union, had agreed to meet in a mediated meeting yesterday, July 2nd. We have reached out to the union reps. We have been watching all of the news and all the blog posts and all those sorts of things, Facebook, etc., for any word on what happened at yesterday's meeting. But so far, anyway, as of recording, no news yet. However, the fact that the two sides are actually meeting with a mediator, I think, is progress for the strike. So let's hope that we might see some movement on this by the end of the week. This is, of course, so as I said, more than a month into the strike at the Cargill plant at Guelph. That plant in particular, it processes about 80% of the beef, of the cattle in Ontario. So there's a huge impact here to the cattle industry here in Ontario. And of course, the East, and yes, cattle comes in from the West too for this plant. So definitely a huge impact there. We also got news, so sticking with Ontario, Gailey Foods has tentatively found a purchaser for the Thornlow cheese plant. So this is a plant that accepts grass-fed dairy, so grass-fed milk, as part of the grass-fed program in Ontario. The plant was announced closed late last fall, so October 31st, and basically Gailey said that it would cost far too much to bring this plant up to snuff, and that they were closing it. So now we have heard that AAA Cheese has entered into an agreement, a non-binding agreement at this point, to purchase the plant. So this is a Mississauga, Ontario-based company. They have not disclosed any of the particulars of this deal. However, there will be a new concept for the plant, which will likely include expanding the manufacturing facility so it can receive more milk, and likely working in a tourist/agritourism side to the plant as well, including fresh food store, a coffee shop, a deli restaurant, and perhaps a patio and outdoor space, and use the existing facility as cold storage. So yes, they have found a buyer, but certainly the discussion of, the age of the existing plant definitely seems to hold true here, that the existing facility just isn't necessarily going to make it as a cheese plant. And so we'll see if this vision for Thornlow cheese, with AAA cheese now taking over, we'll see if it continues. I know that Thornlow cheese, of course, is very important to its surrounding area, and this is a plant that we did see a lot of support come out for this plant when this was announced. So we'll keep you posted, but it looks like there's a tentative deal, and Thornlow cheese will continue in some capacity. Now, shifting to the west, we've got some news on the Cantera seeds front. So we did get news today that the United Farmers of Alberta Cooperative, or more likely known as UFA, has purchased the Ceres Global Ag Corp's % stake in Cantera. So Ceres Global owned 17% of Cantera Seeds. It has sold that entire 17% stake to UFA. The deal is dated July 2nd, so yesterday, and is worth approximately $2.5 million, or just under $1.95 per Class A share for Cantera Seeds. So UFA says the investment in Cantera will not affect day-to-day operations or which seed varieties are available for purchase through the Ag Co-op's network of 34 farm and ranch supply stores serving our customers in Alberta, BC, in Saskatchewan. So keep that in mind. But yes, UFA buying 17% of Cantera Seeds. So there you are. All right, I've got to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you for the Issues panel on Friday. Looking forward to that. And I hope all our American friends have a very wonderful 4th of July celebration. Please keep your fingers. All right. Cheers, everybody. We'll talk to you Friday.